This is the I Heart My Life show. All right, I'm back for the second episode in my transition series. This one is all about transitioning into becoming a mother. So if you haven't listened to part one of this series, I recommend going back and just listening to a little bit of the buildup of what was going on in my business when I found out I was pregnant. And then this episode will make a lot more sense. There's also a birth story episode that myself and my husband recorded a while ago that you can listen to. That's really, really powerful. So, transition into motherhood, it's especially interesting to think about becoming a mother when you're also a business owner. I'm not taking away from anyone who's not or anyone who's in a career, but obviously my perspective is of somebody who has a business. And so I waited to have my daughter until I was 38 when I thought my business would be established and things would be easier. Lo and behold, it ended up being the most challenging year ever in business for us. And, sometimes things just happen that way. You think you have it all planned out. You think you picked the perfect time. But in the end, it's not as you expected. I even remember a moment where I was literally holding Charlotte on the couch and crying and apologizing to her that I didn't have everything together like I'd hoped. And I was sorry to her that I was so stressed out and I wasn't where I thought I would be in my business at this time, and hoping that she couldn't feel that. And for a lot of the time over the last few years, I have felt that. And I felt guilty that I wasn't where I thought I would be when I had a baby. But ultimately, I do have full trust that everything happens for a reason and in the perfect time. And for whatever reason, this is how it was supposed to be. And James and I have done our best to be able to move through that and to, not cause her to have nervousness and stress. So I'm hoping that we did a good job and that she doesn't kind of take that on from the first few years of her life. I will say, though, that year would have been way more challenging, the last 2 years actually, had I not had my daughter, because the biggest transition for me was being able to see that there's way more to life than just my achievements, my professional achievements, and being able to see that, honestly, nothing really matters besides my daughter and my husband and our happiness together as a family. And as big of a mission as, I have in the world, and as much as I love the work that I do, it's not everything to me, right? And for the last 8 to 10 years, it has been before Charlotte was born. And so the biggest transition was seeing that there's something else that is way more important to me, and also, obviously in need of my attention, in need of my time. And so I can't be everything to the business and everything to Charlotte. I need to figure out what is priority. So that, like I said, was such a perspective shift and such a blessing during such a dark time to have her as a reminder of, like, you know what, this small thing, even though it feels massive right now, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't actually matter. And so I'm going to shift my focus onto my child. So when all of that was happening in our business and I was newly pregnant, like, that was obviously a really interesting time. And then fast forward to Charlotte actually being born. And for me, the birth process was also interesting. I had a home birth. It went really well until the moment where they couldn't get my placenta to come out. And so I had to be transferred to the hospital. And so, as you'll hear in my birth story, basically Charlotte spent her first night in the world with my husband, and I was in a hospital bed, and they were at home. And so I got to see her again the next day, and that was incredible, super emotional. And then I got to go home, which was great. About a month later, though, I realized that I had an infection. So I had a uterine infection, and that was actually really, really serious. I didn't realize how serious it was until my midwife told me that people actually die from that. So I had to recover from that for the next 2 or 3 weeks, take some really, really hardcore antibiotics, which basically wiped out all of the good bacteria in my gut. So I had to rebuild all of that. And that was kind of my entry into motherhood and becoming a mother. And although I took a little bit of time off when I was recovering, I really was kind of full speed ahead back into doing my work in the world. And I was blessed with a daughter who loved to sleep. She's been sleeping through the night since she was 10 weeks old. And so there wasn't the same level of exhaustion as I know most people face, which I'm super grateful for. And at the same time, looking back, I wish I would have given my body more time to recover. I wish I would have put my computer away and given myself more time and space to really transition into this new chapter, which if I do have another child, I will definitely give myself more time and space going forward. But that was kind of the reality. You know, we were rebuilding things, we were figuring things out. And so I didn't necessarily have the luxury, so to speak, of just of taking a longer maternity leave. And I think that that's something a lot of people forget. They think, well, entrepreneurs have the flexibility of their own schedule. But I remember feeling, you know, during that time, a little bit envious of the women in my life who had set maternity leaves. I had a cousin that had 6 months maternity leave, same with one of my sister-in-laws. And I just felt really envious of that. And of course, I can create my own schedule. Of course, there is so many positive things when it comes to being an entrepreneur. But, you know, in that moment, it was like, oh gosh, wouldn't it be nice to have paid maternity leave instead of having to write this email or show up or do all these things and have all this responsibility. So, you know, there's two sides of the spectrum there. In terms of the transition, I think really the biggest thing was now I had this other thing that brought me so much joy, and it wasn't just about my business and my achievement. And so really trying to figure out, what does that look like? How do I really cut back on the time that I'm working so I have more time with Charlotte? How do I work smarter instead of, you know, just devoting all these hours to things that don't actually matter or aren't going to have an ROI? So I'm sure a lot of other mothers have experienced this, where you get really dialed in on your time. Your time is so valuable. And so you want to make sure that what you're doing actually matters, and it's of utmost importance that you do it, because it's taking time away from your child, right? And so that has been a big shift for me, just really dialing back on the amount of time that I am working and only focusing on the things that matter. I also realized that as I was rebuilding, I only wanted to do the things that were legacy work things for me, things I want to leave, you know, what I want to be known for, the way in which I really want to show up in the world, not the stuff that's like the Band-Aid work that's just going to get me through. I wanted to do the stuff that was going to be of value, because if I am going to be spending my time on it, then it needs to be of utmost importance. I also realized that for me as a high achieving woman, what it looks like for me to go all in is like my 100% is probably somebody else's 200%, because I naturally put so much energy into what I'm doing. But what I realized was that there's like a subtle shift in what it means to go all in. And I could actually be all in on my business and all in on my life at the same time. But that didn't mean that I had to give 200% to everything and mentally be all in 24/7. I learned how to compartmentalize a bit more so that I could be all in on my life and all in on my business, just not at the same time necessarily, the same second, the same moment. And so that was a huge shift for me. And I hope I'm explaining that well, but it was really an energetic shift and a different way of looking at things, because it doesn't mean that I don't love what I do and that I'm not fully dedicated to it. But it's not everything to me. It's not all my worth is not tied up in my success as a business owner. And that was a massive shift for me. So I started to ask myself, how can I go all in on my life as well as my business? And what does that look like? And how can they actually coexist? Because I think a lot of people get to this place where they've built something really amazing, maybe by the world's standards, they are successful, but they're unhappy, or they don't have a social life, or they don't even know what they like to do for fun, or they've forgotten to even check in with what their actual desire is. And I do believe at, you know, different points of my career, I've been in that place, and I forget that, you know what, this is my life too. This is the one shot that I get. And so although my work is important, is it really everything? Is it really all that there is? Is it really the only thing that makes me me? And so having a child really helped shift that for me and create a new perspective of what it means to go all in on my life. So that's definitely something I'm really passionate about talking about now with clients and my community is, what does it mean to go all in on your life? What really excites you? What lights you up? And I have worked with so many women who don't know the answer to that. So that's a question I would pose to you today. And I would say the final transition really has to do with what makes me me. And I've already talked a little bit about that here, but I think sometimes when you are a mother, so much of your life is devoted to this little person that sometimes you can lose sight of who you actually are. There isn't a lot of time for you to access those previous versions of yourself. So for example, I remember when we were living in Austin, there was one day where I went out, I got my hair done, I went to work at a cafe or something like that. Maybe it was a hotel, I forget. And I just came back, driving back home, feeling like I was the old version of who I used to be. And that was really, really beautiful. I felt really grateful for that day away and recognized that that's actually really important for me to have so that I can be that version of myself. I can tap into that person and bring her to the surface, even if it's just for a day or two or three. And I'm not saying that she goes away completely, but just tap into who that person and who I really am, even throughout this chapter of motherhood and this new way of doing life and this new amazing addition into my world. And as you'll hear me talk about in part 3 of this transition series, one of the things that I've also been looking at is like, what does it look like for us to live our lives authentically, even though we have this little tiny human in our presence and that we're responsible for? What does it look like for travel and just the way we want to do life in general? Do we want to homeschool her? Do we want to have the flexibility to take her with us when we go to speaking engagements or host events? And the answer is really yes, at least right now. That's what we're coming up with. So you'll hear more about that in part 3, but just allowing myself to embrace who I really am as a woman and as a business owner and as a person, and not forget about her as obviously the motherhood, the mother persona becomes stronger and even more important. The final transition I want to talk about is just this element of being softer. So I had this reading with this spiritual guide recently, and she said, "Oh my goodness, I've never seen your energy like this. I've never seen such a softness." And I remember when I worked with a coach in the past, like that was one of the things she was encouraging me to kind of bring out, was this softer side of me. And I didn't really know what she meant. I tried my best, but motherhood has definitely brought out this softer, more nurturing side to me. Also, I think an element of like, I don't really care what people think, which doesn't feel very soft, but it kind of is, because you're just kind of like leaning back and it's like, well, whatever, I can't do anything about that. And so there's like an element of, a different element of trust in life, a different element in like just being calmer, not being so intense. So just a softness. So what does this mean? Why am I sharing all of this? Well, as you know, with this series, I just wanted to share what's been coming up for me, what I've been working through, in the hopes that this will support you in some way. Whether you're a mother or not doesn't really matter. But I think we all go through those different seasons of life, and we all start to tap into the next version of ourselves and wonder what it means when the old version is no longer there, or though she's only there for a few days out of the week. And I think the biggest message that I have after experiencing the last 17 months is just to be in acceptance and to be in full trust, and to be willing to explore, the new version of yourself, as well as bring back the old version from time to time, and they can coexist. I'm still figuring it out, but I still am who I am and who I've always been in a sense, but now I have this other sort of layer to me, this other part of me, this other thing that I actually feel has been awakened in a way that it hadn't been before. And that's really, really beautiful. So yeah, I'm just super grateful. Charlotte is such a gift. So many of you send me messages about how you love seeing her online, and I so appreciate that. She's such a sweetie and so beautiful, and just everyone says she's the happiest baby, and so I'm so grateful for her. And we can all find those silver linings, or the things or the people that help get us through the dark times, and she's definitely been that for us. So yeah, I'm so grateful. Thank you for being here for this episode. I'll look forward to sharing more in part 3 of this transition series, which is all about us moving our life from Austin, Texas to Columbus, Ohio, and what that's meant for me and my identity and all the shifts that came with that. So I'll talk to you soon. One more thing before you go. I've created a dream life guide to support you if you're in a transition or just trying to get clear on what it is that you actually want. You have a feeling that you're meant for more, there's something else available for you. This guide will support you in getting that clarity and understanding any of the mindset blocks that may threaten to hold you back, and then get into action to the results that you are craving. So go to emilywilliams.com/guide to get this free guide today, plus a bonus walkthrough where I go through all of my framework and the steps that I take to support women just like you in creating their dream life. So go to emilywilliams.com/guide.